It's just past midnight on November 16th, 2024, and the quiet residential streets of East Kilbride, Scotland, are settling into their weekend slumber. In most of the flats along Glen Lee, residents are either asleep or winding down after another ordinary Saturday evening. The November air carries that crisp bite that signals winter's approach, and the streetlights cast long shadows across the empty pavements. But in one small flat, something horrific is about to unfold that will shatter the peaceful suburban silence forever. 21-year-old Phoenix Spencer Horn has just finished sharing a takeaway dinner with her boyfriend of nearly 2 years, 27-year-old Euan Mathan. To neighbours who might have glimpsed them through their windows, they would have appeared like any other young couple, settling in for a quiet night at home after a long week of work. What those neighbours couldn't see was the darkness that had been building behind closed doors. They couldn't know that Phoenix had been trying to leave this relationship for months, or that Euan's jealousy and need for control had been escalating into something far more dangerous than anyone imagined. Keep the timeline of that night in mind as we explore this story, because what happened in those crucial hours after midnight would reveal the true extent of Euan's depravity and forever change how we understand the warning signs that everyone missed. The journey to that horrific November night began in the rolling hills of South Lanarkshire, where two very different lives were taking shape. Phoenix Spencer Horn entered the world in 2003 as the youngest of 4 children in the close-knit town of Strathaven. Her parents, Alison and Graham, had built the kind of household where children flourish, grounded in strong values, surrounded by love, and encouraged to develop their own unique spirits. From her earliest years, Phoenix possessed something special that set her apart. It wasn't just her natural beauty or bright smile, though both were undeniable. It was her spirit, an innate compassion that drew people to her like a magnet. Teachers at Strathaven Academy would later remember her not just as a diligent student, but as someone who noticed when others were struggling and instinctively stepped in to help. Think of Phoenix like a lighthouse. She naturally became a beacon for people navigating difficult waters, offering warmth and guidance without expecting anything in return. This quality would define her throughout her short life, and tragically, it would also become the very trait that kept her trapped in a dangerous situation. After finishing her education, Phoenix threw herself into the working world with characteristic enthusiasm. She found employment at the local Strathaven Hotel, working in their cafe where her natural warmth and genuine care for others made her a favourite among both colleagues and customers. Those who worked alongside her described someone who made even the most mundane tasks look effortless, bringing joy and energy to every shift. Outside of work, Phoenix's life reflected the simple pleasures of a young woman finding her way in the world. She cherished time with her family, loved long walks through the Scottish countryside, and like many of her generation, documented her life through TikTok videos that captured golden hour selfies, ice cream dates with friends, and playful moments with her siblings. Her social media presence painted the picture of someone genuinely happy with life, not the performative happiness that many people project online, but the authentic contentment of someone who appreciated what she had while building towards something better. But in late 2022, at a family gathering when Phoenix was just 20 years old, she would meet someone who would fundamentally alter the trajectory of her life. Euan Mathan was 25 when he first encountered Phoenix at that family gathering. To most people who met him casually, he appeared quiet and reserved, the kind of person who didn't say much in crowds but seemed thoughtful and gentle in one-on-one conversations. At the time, Ewan was working as a postman for Royal Mail, a steady, dependable job that suited his preference for routine and limited social interaction. Colleagues described him as someone who kept to himself, completed his rounds without complaint, and rarely drew attention to himself. But this peaceful exterior concealed a much darker reality that few people had glimpsed. Growing up in Strathaven, just miles from where Phoenix lived, Ewan had attended local schools and maintained what appeared to be a normal childhood. However, digital breadcrumbs from his teenage years told a very different story about the mind developing beneath that quiet facade. Between the ages of 14 and 18, Ewan had posted a disturbing collection of messages on social media that revealed violent fantasies and deeply misogynistic attitudes. These weren't isolated outbursts or typical teenage rebellion. They were systematic expressions of anger and aggression that painted a picture of someone consumed by violent thoughts. In these posts, he wrote about wanting to physically assault women, described scenarios involving violence against specific individuals, and expressed fantasies about dominance and control. Even more troubling, he had created an online persona where he claimed to be involved in drug dealing and pornography, fabrications that suggested someone desperate to project an image of power and sexual prowess. One particularly revealing aspect of these posts was how he described anger itself, claiming that violent emotions made him feel tingly and agitated in ways that suggested he found the sensation pleasurable rather than disturbing. Think of these early social media posts like the warning lights on an aircraft dashboard, individual indicators that might seem minor, but together signal a system that's developing serious problems. Unfortunately, when these posts were eventually deleted, the warning signs disappeared with them. By the time Ewan met Phoenix, he had scrubbed his digital history clean and presented himself as a reformed young man who had outgrown his teenage troubles. To Phoenix and her family, he appeared to be exactly what he seemed, a quiet, hard-working postal worker who was perhaps a bit shy but fundamentally decent. When Phoenix and Ewan began dating in late 2022, they appeared to be a study in opposites that complement each other perfectly. She brought light, laughter, and social energy to his reserved world, while he offered stability, attentiveness, and what seemed like genuine devotion to her vibrant spirit. Friends and family members who observed their early relationship described Ewan as caring and attentive. He made a positive impression on Phoenix's parents, seemed genuinely interested in her life and dreams, and appeared to worship the ground she walked on. Phoenix, with her generous heart and natural optimism, saw the best in Ewan and believed she could help him become more social and confident. She brought him out of his shell, encouraged him to try new experiences, and integrated him into her family and friend groups in ways that seemed to benefit both of them. After several months of dating, they made the decision to move in together in a small rented flat in East Kilbride. From the outside, this appeared to be a natural progression for a young couple in love, taking the next step toward building a life together. But moving in together would reveal aspects of Ewan's personality that had been carefully hidden during their courtship period. The changes in Ewan's behaviour didn't happen overnight. Like a slowly developing storm system, the warning signs appeared gradually and intensified over time in ways that made them difficult to recognise as dangerous. It started with small criticisms and mood swings that Phoenix initially dismissed as normal relationship adjustments. Ewan would make offhand comments about her clothes, express irritation when she spent time with friends, or sulk when things didn't go exactly as he preferred. But these minor irritations gradually evolved into more serious controlling behaviours. He began questioning her friendships, expressing jealousy about her job and the people she interacted with daily, and making demands about how she should dress and behave. This progression is like a river slowly eroding its banks. Each individual incident seems manageable, but over time the accumulated damage creates a completely altered landscape. Phoenix, being naturally empathetic and caring, responded to Ewan's insecurities by trying to reassure him and accommodate his concerns. She modified her behaviour in small ways, hoping to ease his anxiety and restore harmony to their relationship. But rather than being satisfied by these concessions, Ewan's demands became more frequent and more restrictive. He began monitoring her communications, questioning her whereabouts, and becoming explosive when he felt his authority was being challenged. By mid-2024, Phoenix had begun quietly reaching out to friends about the deteriorating situation. She didn't make dramatic announcements or issue ultimatums, but she started letting trusted people know that things weren't working and that she was considering her options. This is when Ewan's behaviour became truly dangerous. When Phoenix finally worked up the courage to tell Ewan that she wanted space in their relationship, his response revealed the manipulative tactics he had been developing throughout their time together. Rather than accepting responsibility for his controlling behaviour, Ewan claimed that his problems stemmed from substance abuse issues that were beyond his control. He told Phoenix that he had become dependent on cocaine, steroids, and alcohol, and that these substances were responsible for his mood swings and aggressive behaviour. This explanation served multiple purposes for Ewan. It allowed him to avoid taking responsibility for his actions while positioning himself as a victim who deserved sympathy rather than accountability. It also gave him a framework for promising change without actually having to examine or modify his fundamental attitudes about relationships and control. Phoenix, with her compassionate nature and genuine desire to help people she cared about, chose to believe that Ewan's substance abuse was the root cause of their problems. She agreed to give him time to address these issues, hoping that treatment and sobriety would restore the gentle, caring person she thought she had fallen in love with. But Ewan had no intention of addressing his underlying issues. Instead, he used his addiction claims as an excuse to continue his controlling behaviour while avoiding consequences for his actions. Think of this dynamic like a broken alarm system that keeps going off. Instead of fixing the underlying problem, Ewan was simply finding new ways to silence the warning signals without addressing what was causing them. By November 2024, Phoenix and Ewan had been living together for nearly 2 years, and the relationship had deteriorated to the point where Phoenix was actively planning her exit strategy. She had confided in family members and close friends about her desire to leave, and she was beginning to take concrete steps toward independence. But Ewan was also escalating his efforts to maintain control over the situation. His substance abuse had worsened, his emotional volatility had increased, and his possessiveness had reached levels that were beginning to frighten Phoenix. The tension in their flat had become palpable to anyone who visited. Friends and family members noticed that Phoenix seemed more subdued when Ewan was around, and that he monitored her conversations and interactions in ways that made everyone uncomfortable. On November 16th, 2024, the Saturday that would become Phoenix's last day alive, Ewan had spent the afternoon alone while Phoenix worked her shift at the Strathaven Hotel. He had messaged her during the day, claiming to feel lonely and expressing neediness that Phoenix responded to with characteristic warmth and reassurance. When Phoenix returned home that evening, they shared a takeaway meal in front of the television, a scene that would have appeared completely normal to any outside observer. At 9:37 p.m, Phoenix sent what would be her final message to her mother, a brief note saying they were having dinner at home. Nothing in that message suggested distress or danger. There were no hidden meanings or coded calls for help. It was simply a daughter letting her mother know she was safe and settled for the evening. But something in Ewan was building toward an explosion that no one could have predicted. What happened in the hours after midnight on November 17th, 2024, represents one of the most disturbing domestic violence cases in Scottish criminal history. The details are so shocking that they challenge our understanding of how quickly a situation can escalate from seemingly normal to utterly horrific. According to forensic evidence and Ewan's own later confessions, sometime around 12:13 a.m, without any apparent provocation or argument, Ewan suddenly launched a vicious attack on Phoenix. Neighbours in the flat below would later report hearing a loud bang followed by the sound of hurried footsteps overhead, sounds that mark the moment Phoenix's life was ending. The attack was swift, brutal, and completely unprovoked. Ewan strangled Phoenix before stabbing her more than 20 times, with many of the wounds concentrated on her face and head. The single stab wound to her chest proved fatal, though the sustained nature of the assault suggested someone in a state of complete psychological breakdown. But what happened next revealed a level of depravity that goes far beyond even the most violent domestic disputes. Rather than calling for emergency medical assistance, fleeing the scene, or even showing signs of remorse or panic, Ewan spent the next several hours systematically desecrating Phoenix's body. He moved her remains to the bathroom, retrieved multiple knives from the kitchen, and decapitated her corpse. This wasn't the action of someone in a drug-fueled blackout or temporary psychotic episode. The methodical nature of his actions, combined with his behaviour over the following day, suggests someone making calculated decisions about how to handle the aftermath of his crime. What Ewan did during the 48 hours between Phoenix's murder and his eventual arrest provides perhaps the most disturbing insight into his psychological state and true character. Rather than experiencing remorse, panic, or even the basic human instinct to flee from the scene of such horror, Ewan settled into a routine that can only be described as utterly depraved. Using Phoenix's phone, he began accessing pornographic content, watching adult videos more than 170 times over the course of the next day. This wasn't occasional viewing, it was an obsessive binge that lasted for hours while Phoenix's mutilated remains lay nearby. During this same period, he also ordered drugs to be delivered to the flat and used Phoenix's car to make trips around town, likely seeking additional substances or exploring ways to dispose of evidence. Perhaps most chillingly, when Phoenix's family began reaching out with concern about her silence, Ewan responded to text messages pretending to be her. He crafted responses that were designed to buy him more time before anyone became suspicious enough to investigate. These actions reveal someone who was not experiencing a psychological breakdown, but rather someone making deliberate choices about how to maximize his gratification while delaying consequences for his actions. Think of this behavior like a computer virus that continues operating according to its programming, even after destroying the host system. Ewan's actions showed a complete disconnection from normal human emotions like guilt, fear, or remorse. While Ewan was engaged in his horrific post-murder activities, Phoenix's family was beginning to experience the kind of worry that starts small but grows into genuine alarm. When Phoenix failed to respond to messages on Sunday morning, her mother Alison initially assumed she might be nursing a hangover or simply needed some space. Ewan's responses, claiming they had both been drinking heavily the night before, seemed to provide a reasonable explanation for her daughter's silence. But as Sunday stretched into Monday with no direct contact from Phoenix, and especially when she failed to show up for her scheduled shift at the Strathaven Hotel, Alison's maternal instincts told her something was seriously wrong. Phoenix was responsible and reliable, the kind of person who would never simply fail to show up for work without explanation. Her unexplained absence was completely out of character and impossible to dismiss as normal behaviour. At 12:10 p.m. on Monday, November 18th, Alison made the decision that would finally bring this nightmare to light. She called the police and requested a welfare check on her daughter. When officers arrived at the flat on Glenlee, they were met by Ewan, who appeared calm and composed despite having spent the previous 48 hours living alongside his girlfriend's mutilated corpse. He invited the officers inside without hesitation or apparent nervousness. What they found inside that small flat was a scene of horror that veteran investigators would later describe as one of the most disturbing crime scenes they had ever encountered. The smell of decomposition and blood filled the air immediately upon entering. Phoenix's body, naked and partially covered by a tea towel, lay in the living area with her severed head positioned upright beneath her left arm. 3 bloodied knives were discovered at the scene, 2 near the body and a 3rd in the bedroom. The extent of mutilation and the positioning of remains suggested someone who had spent considerable time and effort desecrating the victim's body after death. Throughout the discovery and initial questioning, Ewan remained eerily calm and cooperative. When asked directly why he had committed such an act, he provided a response that chilled everyone present. He explained that he couldn't continue living in the flat with a full body, which was why he had attempted to dismember Phoenix's remains. This explanation was delivered without emotion, remorse, or any apparent understanding of the horror he was describing. At one point, he casually remarked to officers, "I guess this is what my next 25 years look like," a comment that suggested he understood the legal consequences of his actions, but felt no emotional connection to the human cost. Even before police arrived at the flat, Ewan had made a decision that revealed his understanding that his situation was hopeless. Just minutes before officers knocked on his door, he had called 999 himself and calmly informed the operator that he had murdered his girlfriend. During that emergency call, when the operator asked if he was certain that Phoenix was dead, Ewan's response was chillingly matter-of-fact. "I know she's dead, mate. She is dead. I even tried to dismember her." This wasn't the confession of someone in emotional distress or psychological crisis. It was the calculated admission of someone who had realised that his window of opportunity for evading consequences was closing and had decided to control the narrative of his capture. Following his arrest, Ewan continued to provide detailed accounts of his actions, claiming that he had experienced a blackout during a drug-fueled episode. He suggested that steroids, cocaine, and alcohol had combined to create a state where he was not in control of his actions. But the forensic evidence and timeline of his behaviour after the murder contradicted any claim of temporary incapacity. His methodical actions over the following 48 hours, the pornography viewing, drug ordering, message fabrication, and body desecration, all pointed to someone making deliberate choices rather than someone experiencing a psychological break. Forensic analysis of Phoenix's phone and other digital devices revealed the full extent of Ewan's depravity during those crucial 48 hours after her death. The evidence showed that he had accessed pornographic content 170 times between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. on Sunday, a marathon viewing session that continued while Phoenix's body decomposed nearby. This digital evidence was crucial because it demonstrated premeditation and calculation rather than impulsive behaviour driven by substance abuse or mental illness. Someone in a genuine blackout or psychotic episode doesn't maintain the focus and motor control necessary for sustained digital activity. The timing of these activities was also significant. Ewan had ordered drugs to be delivered to the flat during the same period, showing that he was capable of planning future activities and making arrangements while simultaneously claiming to have no memory of murdering Phoenix. Surveillance cameras around East Kilbride captured additional evidence of Ewan's movements during this period. showing him driving Phoenix's red Vauxhall Corsa on errands that likely involved drug purchases or attempts to dispose of evidence. Euan's first court appearance came just 2 days after his arrest, where he was formally charged with murder and attempting to defeat the ends of justice. The speed with which the case moved through the initial stages reflected both the overwhelming evidence and the serious nature of the crimes. Due to the brutality and high-profile nature of the case, proceedings were moved to the High Court in Glasgow, where experienced judges and prosecutors handle Scotland's most serious criminal matters. Over the following months, prosecutors built a comprehensive case that drew from autopsy reports, digital forensics, witness testimonies, and detailed crime scene analysis. The evidence package they assembled painted a picture of premeditated violence, followed by calculated attempts to avoid consequences. When the case finally reached trial on June 17, 2025, the courtroom was packed with reporters, members of the public, and Phoenix's grieving family members. The atmosphere was tense as prosecutors laid out the charges in graphic detail, describing how Phoenix had been strangled, stabbed repeatedly, and then decapitated. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the impossibility of mounting any credible defense, Ewan entered guilty pleas to both charges. His legal team made no attempt to dispute the facts of the case, instead focusing on mitigation arguments about his mental state and substance abuse issues. On July 14, 2025, Euan Mathan received the sentence that would define the rest of his life. Life imprisonment with a minimum term of 23 years before becoming eligible for parole consideration. In delivering the sentence, the judge described the killing as truly dreadful and condemned Ewan for betraying the trust of someone who had considered him family. The court heard detailed victim impact statements from Phoenix's family, describing the devastating effect her loss had on everyone who loved her. The judge specifically noted Ewan's behaviour during the 48 hours following the murder, emphasising how his actions revealed a horrific lack of remorse or urgency. The systematic desecration of Phoenix's body and his indulgence in pornographic content while her corpse lay nearby demonstrated a level of depravity that warranted the maximum possible sentence. In his sentencing remarks, the judge observed that Ewan had robbed her of all dignity, words that captured not just the physical desecration, but the complete dehumanization that characterized his treatment of someone who had loved and trusted him. The impact of Phoenix's murder extended far beyond the immediate circle of family and friends who knew and loved her. The case shocked the Scottish public and sparked conversations about domestic violence, warning signs, and the dangers of social media's curated reality. A memorial bench was installed in Strathaven where donations are collected for Glasgow Women's Aid, ensuring that Phoenix's memory contributes to helping other women escape dangerous relationships. Her family established this memorial as a way of transforming their grief into action that might prevent similar tragedies. The stark contrast between Phoenix's social media presence and the reality of her final months highlighted how carefully controlled online personas can mask serious problems. Her TikTok videos showed a happy, confident young woman enjoying life with her boyfriend, while the reality involved escalating control, intimidation, and ultimately lethal violence. This disconnect serves as a crucial reminder that social media represents highlight reels rather than complete stories. The smiling photos and cheerful videos that Phoenix and Ewan shared online concealed a relationship dynamic that was deteriorating toward violence. The case of Phoenix Spencer Horn and Euan Mathan provides a textbook example of how domestic violence can escalate from psychological control to lethal assault. The progression from Ewan's teenage social media posts expressing violent fantasies to his ultimate murder of Phoenix shows how warning signs can be present years before they manifest in criminal behaviour. Ewan's early online posts about violence against women weren't just teenage rebellion or attention-seeking behaviour. They were expressions of genuine psychological problems that would later manifest in his treatment of intimate partners. The fact that he eventually deleted these posts and cleaned up his digital history suggests awareness that his attitudes were problematic, but also indicates deception about his true character. The controlling behaviour that emerged after Phoenix and Ewan moved in together followed predictable patterns of domestic abuse, isolation from support systems, monitoring of communications and activities, and escalating demands for compliance with his preferences and requirements. Phoenix's natural empathy and desire to help people made her particularly vulnerable to Ewan's manipulation tactics. When he claimed that substance abuse was responsible for his behaviour problems, she responded with compassion rather than skepticism, giving him multiple opportunities to change while putting herself at increasing risk. The tragedy is that Phoenix was actively planning to leave the relationship when Ewan killed her. She had recognized the danger and was taking steps to protect herself. But Ewan's violence escalated faster than her ability to safely extract herself from the situation. One of the most disturbing aspects of this case is how completely Ewan and Phoenix's social media presence concealed the reality of their relationship dynamics. Their online content showed a happy young couple enjoying ordinary relationship milestones and daily activities together. This carefully curated image served multiple purposes for Ewan. It provided cover for his controlling behaviour by creating evidence that Phoenix appeared happy and willing in their relationship. It also satisfied his need to project an image of success and normalcy that contradicted his underlying insecurities and violent tendencies. For Phoenix, maintaining a positive social media presence may have been a way of convincing herself that the relationship problems were temporary and manageable. It's common for victims of domestic abuse to minimize or rationalize their experiences, and social media can become a tool for maintaining that denial. The lesson for friends, family members, and the broader public is that social media should never be used as the primary indicator of someone's well-being or relationship health. The pressure to present perfect lives online can prevent people from seeking help when they need it most. Phoenix's murder was preventable, but only if the warning signs had been recognized and acted upon earlier in the relationship timeline. Ewan's teenage social media posts expressing violent fantasies should have been treated as serious indicators of future risk rather than dismissed as normal adolescent behavior. The escalating pattern of control and intimidation that characterized the final months of their relationship created multiple opportunities for intervention, but Phoenix's natural desire to handle the situation privately prevented her from seeking help until it was too late. Domestic violence prevention requires community awareness of warning signs, accessible resources for people seeking to leave dangerous relationships, and cultural changes that make it easier for victims to seek help without shame or stigma. Phoenix's story reminds us that domestic violence affects people from all backgrounds and circumstances. She was intelligent, loved, and had strong family support, but these advantages couldn't protect her from someone determined to maintain control through violence. The memorial bench in Strathaven and the ongoing donations to Glasgow Women's Aid ensure that Phoenix's memory contributes to preventing similar tragedies. Her death serves as a stark reminder that behind the carefully curated images of social media, real people are struggling with real dangers that require real intervention and support. The case of Euan Mathan demonstrates that domestic violence perpetrators often hide their true nature behind masks of normalcy and respectability. His transformation from troubled teenager to apparently stable postal worker to brutal murderer shows how dangerous individuals can remain undetected in our communities until they strike. Phoenix Spencer Horn deserved a long, happy life filled with the love and opportunities that her character and spirit had earned. Instead, she became a victim of someone who saw her compassion as weakness, and her love as something to be possessed and controlled. Her story must serve as a warning about the very real dangers that can hide behind ordinary facades, and as inspiration for creating communities where people like Phoenix can find safety and support before it's too late.